Hello, and once again, welcome to another episode of Behind the Business with myself, Steve Swift from Client Direction, and as always, my good friend John. John, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Steve. As ever, it's been a busy week, but it's been a good one, and looking forward to another fun-packed episode. So, what have you got for us today?
Well, today, John, I wanted to basically give some real life examples of what we've been talking about over the last two episodes alone. Where just for those people that maybe haven't seen them yet, shame on you. But also to recap for the ones that have or have been listening on their preferred podcast providers, because obviously we're on Apple, iTunes, and all that kind of stuff, as well as on YouTube. Is we talked about strategy, and we broke that down into two parts over 2 weeks. And we really deep dived into that so people could understand what they needed to have in place first, and then how they can use milestones to reach the goal as part of the strategy. So what I wanted to do today is actually give you an example of something that's recently happened with myself and one of my clients. Now, I want to say right at the get-go, this isn't to brag and boast. This isn't to try and put me on a pedestal. It's to impress upon you that what we have been sharing with you over this last 6.5 hours plus of video material that's completely free, these resources that we've done every single week on the Behind the Business podcast are things that you can use. You apply what we say and you will get the results I'm about to share with you. And they are pretty astonishing results, but they are consistent results that I get time and time again from my clients. So again, I'll go through the topic today, which is what happens when you apply what we're showing you and sharing with you in these episodes. And then you can make a decision what's going to be the right move for you. So let's get straight into this now without hamming it up anymore and actually get into it. What we talked about in the last couple of episodes, as I said, was strategy and milestones and how you can reach your goal. So over the last 8 weeks, I've been working with a brand new client. And when I approach any client and start to engage with the client, and we've already got something in place, they've enlisted my services, and we're good to go. I've identified what they're looking to achieve and what their expectations are from paying me what they do and having me work with them. And in this particular client, they were looking to increase their lead generation sales. So it was more about their sales team. And so what I did was I put a plan together. And I structured it using all the things which I have shared with you over the last 12 weeks. I've also included in when I carry out this task, if you like, a lot of the things that John has gone through with you in all the episodes that we've done so far and will continue to do in episodes to come in the future. So if you haven't listened to all the previous episodes, I really strongly suggest, you take the time to do so. And if you're not going to do it just now, by the time I've explained and shown you exactly what the numbers are from applying what we've done, I think you're probably going to go and take a watch, because it is well worth your time investing in this knowledge that we're sharing, again, for free. So what did we do? Well, first of all, what I had to do is I had to identify who their ideal client was. Something I've done an exercise on previously, where it was the ideal client avatar blueprint. Went through it in detail. Go and have a look at that. This is where you can start the process. From there, what I then did was I started to introduce what we call icebreakers and common ground topics, things that build rapport, because that's what it's all about when you're trying to engage with somebody. You never, ever, ever try to sell to anybody, because as John said on previous episodes, if you're a salesperson, they know that you're going to sell to them. And if you've got an appointment and you've gone around to see them, you may well have samples with you. So they know you're going to show them something because you want to buy from them. So you're being sold to. You don't have to force that on anybody. And as we've said also, in the UK, we're a culture of really not wanting to be sold to, not like other countries which love being sold to a lot. So we have to approach it in a way where the barriers of objection and very standoffish are reduced. And that's what we do when we're building rapport with people. We find that common ground, those similar interests, and don't make it up. It's got to be truthful and factual, and otherwise your integrity goes out the door, because you'll trip up at some point. You'll forget what you've said. And if it isn't real and true, and something that is actually right in your life, and it's something that you do strongly believe in, you'll catch yourself out. They'll not have to do it, and then also your credibility is gone, and you're pretty much a dead duck, and nothing's going to happen. So make sure it's honest and truthful what you're sharing with people. Once you've got that going, and this is what I did by calling people, sending people emails. This is what I did initially. I used those strategies there, those little tactics, to actually get through this first phase. And so you could class that as a milestone, which is what John was talking about to reach the goal in last week's episode. John, did you want to jump in at any point?
I just wanted to ask you some questions, and if it's all right with you, Steve, I'm going to let you do most of the talking this week. But if something crops up and I've got a question, I'm going to ask it.
Yeah, please do.
Because I think that might be valuable. Now, you said there that the first strategy you did, once you got your ideal client, was you started building rapport initially through phone calls and emails.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Would you do that in a certain order? Would you choose a phone call for a certain type of client or an email for another? How would you decide which strategy to use and what order to use it in?
Good question. Fantastic question, John. Yeah. Now, because of the nature of the industry that I am doing this work for, I know historically from my years and years of experience that the people I want to speak to are very, very busy, and they hardly ever pick up the phone. So the best way for me to grab their attention is by sending them an email, because they're sat at the desk working emails, looking at spreadsheets, because they are the numbers people we have behind the business. They're the ones that cost everything up. So they're the people. It could either be in procurement department, it could be the buying department, it could be the quantity surveying department. These are the sort of titles that people have that I am wanting to initially make contact with, because they're the people that's going to go, that's too expensive, or that's cheap, but why is it cheap? They're going to question it. So the easiest way for me to get in touch with these people on this particular scenario, John, is by email first. And in the email, I state that I will be giving them a call to answer any questions that they may have based on the content within the email I send them, or if there's anything that they'd like to discuss further. So I'm preempting the fact I'm going to be calling them, which relates to the thing I just said about don't try and sell to people. They know that you're there to sell them. So I'm already setting the scene. I encourage them to get back in touch with me by email if it's easier for them. Otherwise, I will speak with them in a couple of days. So this part of the strategy, John, and I just mentioned to the viewers or the listeners that I use strategies that you have shared. And when I'm doing this email send, I take on board the flow chart that you said. You know, I know I'm waving my hands like a wave here across the screen for those that are listening, but you did a very good demonstration with those graphics where you could see yourself taking the picture, if I remember rightly. The shadow, that was the one I was on about. Yeah. And it's whereabouts you are with your energy levels, and also thinking where your prospects' energy levels are as well. Because if they're really low, they haven't got the time and they're not really bothered. So you've got to catch them when they're positive and upbeat and one thing or another. And I found with this particular industry that if you're sending emails on a Friday or on a Monday, you can then give them a call on a Tuesday or a Wednesday to follow up from that. And it's a really good response rate.
That was going to be my next question, was if your initial contact...
beat you to it.
If your initial contact is by email, how long do you leave it before the follow-up call?
I state in the email, feel free to reply to me when you get 2 minutes. Otherwise, if I haven't heard from you beforehand, I'll try giving you a call in the next couple of days. Right.
So you're not being specific about, I'll call you at 2:00 on next Wednesday.
No, because that might not be convenient for them. So I want to leave it fairly open, so that they don't have to think, oh, that person's going to ring me at this particular time if I don't respond to them, because then it's putting pressure on them. And the last thing I want to do on this initial conversation is them to feel pressured, because again, that's going into the old style of selling, you know, hard sell, and you know, people don't respond well to that.
And just to be clear, before we move on to the next part of your process, the people you're talking about, they've not heard from you before. The email they're receiving, that's the first contact from you.
That is absolutely right. These are completely cold audience. I've never spoke with them before. I've never met them before. I feel like a magician. You know, we haven't pre-staged this. You know, literally, there are people. I have actually gone out there, and it's a very simple way of just to cover this, because I didn't. to give a little bit more content for people to know the processes. When I go to look for people, I understand the company I'm doing the work for initially, and then I identify who those ideal clients are by doing the ideal client avatar process, which we've said before in previous episodes. And then I go to find them, and I use a couple of methods online to find them. There is LinkedIn is a massive one, because you can filter down hugely on LinkedIn. I'm not going to go into how you do it because there isn't time today.
LinkedIn's great. I'm using LinkedIn all the time at the moment.
There you go. So LinkedIn is one. Facebook is another one. I go on to networking groups to find people and see what's happening in their world at the moment. There's plenty of, like, for example, Construction Line. They post so much about what's happening in the construction industry, for example. So if your ideal client works in the construction industry, the chances are you're going to know what's going on. There are other platforms that you can use that are paid platforms, where it will tell you everything that's happening within a specific industry and who's involved with it. And again, that will then give you contact details for you to then reach out to them. And you can do that while still being within the guidelines of GDPR that we have in the UK here, obviously, for not doing unsolicited. And on the back of that, it's not actually an unsolicited email that you're sending, because it's relevant to their business with what we have to offer. So therefore, it may be of interest to them. If they come back and say, no, I'm not interested, that's fine, job done, but you've not broken any laws or rules at the time of recording this particular episode, as far as I am aware. So just to cover all that bases off as well. So any other questions, John, that you think the listeners might have as well before I move on to the next stage?
No, I think that's great, Steve. I think you just raising GDPR is a really good one. And I think we should park that for a future episode and kind of go into depth on data handling and that kind of stuff, because that's something that everybody falls down on. So I think maybe we'll look at that for a future episode. But anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you for quite so long there, but I thought I just wanted to get some clarification on that part of the process for the listener.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the right thing to do, John, because there'll be people watching or listening to this thinking, oh, I've got a question, and how do we stop this guy from talking? And by you being their voice, so to speak, I think it's going to add a lot more content in here. And you're right, the GDPR, and then you're talking ICO and all different things like this, and then your SARs that you can request. And there's a big animal there that we can discuss, and we can put that together in another podcast. So going back to the actual strategy that I use using milestones. So hopefully you're keeping track of this. I know we jumped a little bit there, but that's why it's recorded. You can watch it back and make notes as you go along. So I've identified the ideal client. I've introduced and gone through the icebreaker and the common ground kind of topics. The next part that I do is I want to find out and identify how urgent their need is for this type of solution. Because again, another place where people fall down is they try to sell to somebody by not selling to them, but they haven't got an urgent need right now. And what I classify is as the buying thermometer. And very simple, if you think of a thermometer, the bottom is usually cold, and when it gets to the very top, it's red hot. Whereabouts is your ideal client on the buying thermometer? Are they cold and like, no interest? A little bit warmer? Yeah, something's triggered in their mind, thinking, oh, maybe I ought to look at that. And then another one, oh, I'm really interested. I need to find out a bit more information about this. And then right at the top, I've got this problem and I need it solving. How the heck am I going to solve it? Who can help me? Who can fix this problem? And so by identifying that through conversation, which are questions, but as a conversation, so it's all part of the rapport again, because I'm a big believer that when people say, well, how long do you do the icebreaker and the common ground and the rapport building? You do it throughout the entire conversation of presentation, as far as I'm concerned, including all follow-ups. Because if you don't, you're breaking that flow, and then the continuity is gone, and people are now starting to question your integrity, subconsciously possibly, as well as consciously. So you need to maintain that throughout. And again, that's why I said you have to be honest and truthful, because otherwise you'll catch yourself out or be caught out, and your integrity is gone and credibility is gone. So when you find out someone's urgency, you know whether or not they're a hot prospect to continue the conversation with now and send further information that's relevant to what their needs are. And I'll get to that part in a second. Or whether or not to say, well, shall we schedule a follow-up call? Is it okay if I keep in touch with you periodically? Or the other way you can position that question is, when would you think you'd have a need for this? And because of the industry that I'm discussing at the moment, there are set times where projects will start and end. So by asking that question, it's like, right, okay, you've got a project starting in 3 months. So if I give you a call back in about 6 to 8 weeks, just to touch base and see whether or not that time frame is still being achieved, would that be okay? And you're asking for permission, but you're also confirming that this is going to take place, so they're ready for it. And then again, it's not unsolicited, and they're prepared to accept your call, and there's a good conversation because you can relate this back to the initial conversation you have. John, is there anything you wanted to jump in on that side of things?
That's really clear, that, Steve. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, what you're doing there is finding out the availability to focus on the urgent clients initially. That's where you want to be focusing your time. Some people call it low-hanging fruit. Some people call it cherry picking the best. Rather than you spending a lot of time, effort, and energy on somebody that really isn't interested or doesn't have a strong enough need for your solution to solve their pain, because it's not hurtful enough at the moment, or it's not a strong enough desire for them to need it. And remember, we did the need and want previously, and the difference between the two. You can then schedule, and John said this about putting things in your planner. And this is where your planner comes into its own massively. And you can use your Outlook calendar or your Google calendar or a traditional, book calendar and write it in if that's how you prefer to work. Then what you're doing is you're suddenly building up yourself a pipeline. And your pipeline is not for now, getting close, hot prospect. Again, I'm keeping that fairly broad. You can drill down to it slightly more levels if you wanted to, but just for the sake of this episode and for time restraints, we'll stick with those 3. Once you have done that, another milestone, as far as I'm concerned, in that particular strategy I'm discussing, is complete. So as John said last week, that piece of paper, put it away, go to your filing cabinet or wherever you've got your different sheets for the different milestones, you pick the next one out. And for me, in this process, it's then presenting the solution that hits their pain points. And this is just to the ones which have an urgent need now. Their pain is so bad, they need something. Something could have happened in the business and it's caused this problem. They need to solve it fast. It could be that they are a company which react to something just before they need it to prevent that thing from happening. So again, now it's the time to say, well, are you saying that you require these services? Are you requiring this solution? What are you wanting it to do? What's your expectations? And you ask these questions separately, and then you zip it. And like I said before, 10% rule. If you're talking more than 10% during a presentation, you're not listening enough. That's why I've got 2 of these and 1 of these. You're not listening enough, so you can't find out the relevant information that you need in order to present your ultimate offer and the only solution to their pain. Because when we get further down this process, you'll see where that comes into its own. So there might be some questions bubbling, and I believe I've got them covered as I go through this episode today. So that is where you want to be going with that, is presenting your solution that hits those pain points and make it relatable as well. So they can visually see it working for them. So they can visually see it in their business. They can see it taking away that problem that they've got or potentially going to have before it happens. And that makes it more relatable. It makes it more believable. It makes it so that they have basically ticked in their box that to-do list has been cleared. This person that has just presented all this to me ticks that, ticks that, ticks that. This is perfect. I don't need to waste any more time because the people that I'm speaking to on this particular example are very, very busy people. They haven't got time to get lots and lots and lots of quotes in. So if you can present it that relates to them, hits the pain buttons, you've done all the, the groundbreaking and the icebreakers and everything before, you've got everything going and it's flowing very, very well. So that once that's complete, and I know that's a short part of the process, but it's a very important key one, you can then move on to the next. And before I do that, John, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
I just wanted to reiterate there, because what you've described very succinctly there is the fact that in order for this process to work, you have to be particularly knowledgeable about the issues that are affecting your potential client, which means you have to be knowledgeable about and do your research on your client and the client's industry and the types of problems that they experience. Because if you're talking to a prospect and you're talking about a potential problem that you think they might have, but they don't experience that problem, then you've just potentially washed yourself out of a potential sale.
Totally.
So one of the things that I think is really important that you're obviously talking around, but we haven't sort of explicitly said it, is there's research work going on in the background here before you send that initial email, before you get on the phone and say, this is the solution to your problem. You've done research, and you obviously, with this particular example, you know this marketplace very, very well. You know what their timescales are like. You've talked about the buying window, projects starting and ending. You know, if you speak to somebody at the end of a project and your service relates to the beginning of a project, they're not going to be interested in buying from you right now, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be interested in buying from you in the future. So build that rapport and keep it going. And maybe that's something you can talk about a little bit later on, is if you do hit that situation, and I know you said, you know, I'll give you a call in 8 weeks time or whatever, is there anything you do within that 8 weeks to sort of keep that on the boil with that client, or do you just leave it and the 8 weeks is where you go with?
Good point, John. Again, another great question, and relevant to this particular industry example. It is all about what you've just said there, is when they're coming towards the end of a project, it might not be the time where they're interested. However, on this particular example, it's very much the case, because as they're nearing the end of one project, they're already having sight of their next project. So they're not going to be as needy, shall we say, but they are still going to have an interest. So they're slightly lower down the thermometer. So when I was saying about the gauging, when you're filling in, you know, who you're going to call back and when for your pipeline of your prospecting stage of the pipeline, is these are ones that you're identifying. There is going to be a need. It's just not quite now. And they're going to tell you when their start date is likely to be. And you always pull it back by a few weeks so you don't miss the boat, because projects can suddenly get pulled forward. They might get something that works that they were waiting for, and all of a sudden it gets completed ahead of schedule, and that brings their schedule forward. And that obviously can flip over as well, you know, onto the other side where it's delayed, and you just reschedule. So there's not really anything you do to keep it on the boil. You agree that you are going to speak with them, and it's going to be so many weeks prior to what they've said. So you give them an approximate date. Again, keep it slightly open just in case anything changes. And it also means that if you're having a bit of a quiet period, there's nothing wrong with you ringing them few days earlier, because you've not specified a set date and time. And that's why with this particular industry, you can leave it a little bit open like that, because nothing happens really quickly. So you don't have to be so specific. Other industries, yes, you would need to be right. So if I call you on Monday at 2 o'clock, is that a convenient time to pick up the conversation? That works great for me. Brilliant. And you make sure you call on that day, on that time. This, not so much so.
Right.
So once you've got that particular milestone boxed off and done, then this is the point that I would then present the value. I would put the perceived value to them. And by that, it's basically just covering back over what we've already said in the conversation and the email that came before the phone call. That is basically consolidating everything that they've said they're needing, the pains and problems that they're having or feel they could have, and that's why they want to prevent it. And you do that, and it also covers the objections, because you're consolidating. And if you remember, John went through a two-part section about objection handling, and then I backed that up with the consolidation afterwards. This is that part. So if you remember at the beginning of this episode, I said I use things of my expertise, but I also incorporate the things that John has been teaching you. And this is exactly one of those cases. When I'm preparing to present them with a perceived value of what we're going to provide them with, it's going to tick all the boxes that they've said that they've got a problem with. So rather than having the objections coming, I'm going to consolidate those by recapping everything that I found out by listening and the research I did before, to make sure I have understood, and also they understand what my offer is to them, my solution is. And every time you say a part, does that make sense? Yes. Another thing that you need to do, though, and this is key actually, is it's very key, so please do make notes or make a point whatever timeline we're on at the moment on this video, or if you're listening to come back to this point.
26 minutes.
Thank you very much. Is when you're actually consolidating with them and you're confirming that they've understood something. And let me give you an example of, I don't know, let's pick something completely out of the blue. Home CCTV. You know, you're a domestic CCTV alarm installer, for example. I know that's probably alienated lots of other industries, but it's relevant to you as well, so please do pay attention. And this is when you're saying to somebody, so the cameras we're going to use are Dower 4 megapixel IP cameras. Are you okay with that particular product, and do you understand that product? And the customer will go, yeah, like fantastic. Just so I know, just explain to me what you think that is, just so I know that I've definitely explained it so it's understandable. And that's the point where they're going to say, well, I remember the 4 megapixel bit. And hopefully, if you've done the report and the ice breaking at the beginning, this isn't going to be awkward. They're going to have a bit of a laugh and a chuckle about it, because now you've just outed them that they've not really been listening. But that's a good thing, because it means it gives you an opportunity to reaffirm your level of expertise, the quality of equipment that you're going to install, which ramps up the perceived value. Therefore, when you deliver the price, it's not going to be as big a shock. It might be a nice surprise how little the price is going to be, depending on how high you present it and perceive it to be before you deliver it. Hope that kind of makes sense there. So by doing the consolidation, you're covering the objections and you're ready to deliver your price. So any questions on that part, John?
No,
because we've reached another milestone.
That's really clear, Steve. Really clear.
Okay, thank you. So now we move on to the confirm that there is a deal to be had and close it with the price and asking for the business. So there's quite a few things in there, okay? So first of all, we confirm once more. So we've just gone through all the objection handling with consolidation and perceived the value. We've presented the pain problems and how it all makes it relatable to them. We've covered and understood the urgency. So we're speaking to the right people at the right time. And before that, we were doing all the icebreaker and rapport building to get that common ground with topics. Now what you're going to do is say, so with everything that we've just gone through and said, and you're happy with everything, I'd like to just confirm that this is how much it's going to be, and can I have your business? And it was as simple as that. I don't know if people are expecting some fancy jargon or whatever, but it isn't. It's as simple as that. If you've done everything else before, you get to the point where you say, have we got a deal? Are we in business? Are we good to go? Can we get that order from you today? Because then we can get it in the diary and get it scheduled to actually get it delivered out to you. When you said earlier on, you said you needed it by this date, get the order today, we can confirm that from you also today. So we all know we're going to be able to deliver it and meet your expectations. So are we in business? And you hold your hand out if you're in front of them and you're allowed to do that. I know there's some restrictions. I don't know, fist pump or elbow, or you just, send me an email with a PO number on it. And if they come back to you with any question, well, yeah, that's great. I just need to run a few things by some of the team. That's fine. Yeah. What sort of things are you going to run by? Because I might be able to just, help you out with some information you can pass on to them if that's okay. You are grabbing that objection before they vanish, because that might be them now going to go away still a little bit confused, and that can lose you the sale. It might not, but there's a chance it could lose you the sale. And you're trying to reduce down that risk of losing the opportunity to bank some cash by delivering what they say they need when they need it to solve their pain. So listen out for it. And John mentioned this, look out for reactions and that. It was in a much earlier episode. It's seeing people's reactions to things and behavioral patterns. And again, this is John's field 100%. And it's things, again, that I use when I'm speaking with people face to face or listening on the phone to the tonality they're using and the words they use. John gave an example where sometimes people will react to something and you'll go, oh, sorry, you just did something then, and it's like something didn't quite sit right. But that emotion could have been from something you said 2-3 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago. If you remember, John said this in the episode. Was that right, John? Yeah,
that's absolutely right. That was in a discussion about micro gestures. Whenever you're thinking about something, you have these uncontrolled gestures that sort of give things away. So if you say something to a potential client and you see them sort of go, I mean, that's a very exaggerated version of it, but if you sort of see them go, well, something happened there. Something I just said didn't sit right. What was that thought that went across your mind? And that will break that pattern, because when you said something that didn't sit right, they've been sat there not listening to you thinking, well, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that. And the bit you saw was them going, ha, 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 ha. Right, got you. What was it? And they won't know that they've done that because it's a micro gesture. It's really tiny. So they'll jump back probably and go, well, nothing. It's like, yeah, there was. Don't let them off the hook. There was something there. Something I said either didn't sit right or you didn't agree with it. What was it? And make them tell you, because they know what it was, because they've been sat there for 2 minutes going, well, he's wrong about that. well, tell me I'm wrong. Bring it out into the room. You can address it. And if you've said something that doesn't sit right, maybe you've phrased something in a way that makes them think you haven't quite understood, well, it gives them a chance to explain. And then you can say, right, well, obviously I was slightly off base there, but here's what we're going to do about it. And you can bring that back, because otherwise it festers. And you get that response at the end of either, well, I can't afford to pay it, or, oh, I'm going to have a word with the team. Well, if you're going to meet with the team, I'm here now. Let's go and do it. Do you want me in? Do you want me in that meeting to answer any questions? I mean, actually, Steve, what's your view on that? If you're face to face with a client and they say, I need to have a meeting with the team, I've got to go and see, I'm going to go from this meeting and speak to somebody else. What is your view in saying, well, would you like me to come with you now?
I don't ask them if they'd like me to come with them now. I am a bit more direct than that. But if they turn around, and they have done in the past when I've worked with other clients, they said, well, we're just not quite sure. We need to run it by everybody. That's fantastic. When are you going to do that? Well, they're in the other room. We're going to go through now. Fantastic. I just stand up, get my stuff, and start walking to the door. And I open the door, so after you. And they're like, oh, okay. They're not going to turn around and say, you can't come in this meeting.
Yeah.
Because you've got that relationship with them because of what you've done right from the word go. If you followed those steps and you've honestly, with truth and integrity, nurtured that relationship, you get your stuff and go, I've done it before where someone says, oh, we just need to have a little chat. And I've gone and sat between two people and gone, right, come on then. What is it that's on your mind? Tell me now. And I've done that. And I've had a managing director of the company that I was doing the work for. His jaw hit the floor. And I just carried on. We got the business. Mm. And they were happy that they'd done business with us, more importantly. But when we left, the MD went, I can't believe you sat between them. He says, I was so embarrassed. I was shocked. What did you do that for? I says, did we get the business? He went, yeah, but he says, that was so unorthodox. I says, yeah, but I built that relationship with him. So it was fine that I basically shoved in and says, budge up and sat down. It wouldn't work in every situation. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying go and use the old shoved up duck, let me sit in here. Because for some people, you're just going to get punched or you're going to get asked to get your coat and go,
This brings me to another point. And I'm looking at the clock here, Steve, but I think this is really valuable. So if you're happy, I'm happy for this episode to go a little bit longer.
Yeah, well, there isn't much more to cover. I'm literally going to reveal the results after we've done this part.
So the thing that just occurred to me there is, there are situations where you're in the room with somebody who is a decision maker, but in order to make that level of decision, they need 2 or 3 people, right? So with that in mind, once how early in the process would you identify that one person's not going to cut it for that particular sale? And how would you then encourage or would you even encourage to have that conversation rather than with one person over the phone in a room or on a conference call with all of those people? And at what point, if you can't get all those people together, at what point do you say, well, it's worth doing it one by one? Or would you even do that?
Right. Okay. So just to break it down and try and keep it simple and easy for people to take action and do this themselves. When I'm identifying the ideal client right at the beginning of the task, the first part, the first milestone is I identify who is the highest ranking person within an organization, because it's always easier to get action if you go for the person at the top. And 9 times out of 10, I've done this with a huge company, and I've basically gone straight for the MD. and they've just said, thanks for reaching out to us. This is the guy that deals with all that for me. So I've CC'd him on this email, drop him some details, or maybe give him a quick call and go from there. Because it's come from the top down, that person lower down the pecking order, so to speak, is going to have to listen and take notice because it's come from the gaffer. It's come from the person at the top. So that is why I try to work my way down. It's harder to speak with and I'm not trying to be derogatory or making people out to be less worthy or valuable to a company. But if you talk to the entry level people, the people that do the mundane everyday things, even though those are just as important as people that get into the nitty gritty of things, if you talk to people higher up rather than lower down, it's easy to cascade that order, if you like, that instruction, rather than trying to get it fed back up to the people that need to hear it. Because the people at the bottom will love to talk all day long, but that's not getting you the business. Whereas if you're speaking to the people high up and then they're directed who to deal with, that's going to get you in a conversation with the decision makers very quickly. So that almost eradicates that situation or scenario you just mentioned about, well, we need to speak with more than one people. So that kind of covers that one, John. There are occasions, though, where I will still get cascaded down to the person that deals with it, and they'll say, yeah, well, I'm the person that basically runs the numbers. I'm the one that collates it all. I'm the one that gathers everything in. And then what we'll do is, as a board, we'll discuss where we're going to go and if anyone's got any feedback or input. At that point, and that's identified fairly early on, because it'll be, as the email from Mr. or Mrs. MD said, I'm just reaching out to discuss this with you. I'll give you a call. Is today convenient, or would you prefer to give you a call tomorrow? And is there any particular time, morning or afternoon? And again, it's still fairly vague, but then you can give me a call now if you want. Brilliant. You get on the phone and you say, right, obviously we're discussing X, and X can be whatever your particular product or service is, and it can be online or offline, just so we're covering all the bases of people listening or watching. And at that point, you're saying, so obviously we're going to go through this that you're needing. Are you the guy that signs off on it, or are you collating everything together and then you have an input in it, but it has to come from a number of people, like, for example, the MD that I originally emailed. So you're asking the question at the beginning, then you know what your time frame is and whether or not you have to continue the conversation and keep relating and bringing other people into the conversation that not necessarily there at that time. But it's just reaffirming to that person you're talking to that you understand you're not going to get a sign off right now, and there's going to be another stage to go through or another phase to go through. So you'd add that as another milestone when you're doing your milestone side of things. And everybody's, understanding where the conversation is going to go. So that's how I would identify it. And I would never try and go from the person at the bottom. Great if you're just going into a business and you're saying, oh, the receptionist, they are brilliant people to get information from. And I treat every receptionist as though they're the owner of the company. I don't do it to get my foot in the door, although it does help. But it's because I feel that they're as important as the MD, because they're the people that's going to say yes or no to actually getting to speak to somebody, opening the door, putting in a phone call, or giving you an email. They are so important. So they need to be your new best friend, basically. And again, you can use the icebreaker and common ground with them. And again, keep it truthful, keep it honest, and it keeps your integrity. I did this when I walked into a hotel in New York, and I spoke with the receptionist. I wanted to speak to somebody in particular because it was a hotel, but they had some serviced officers as well. And I went in and I spoke with a young lady on reception. We got on really well, had a good bit of banter. And it turned out she was the daughter of the owner of the entire building. So instead of me speaking to the few people I wanted to try and get to speak to, I got to speak to the person at the top. Fantastic result. So again, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't underestimate who you're talking to, because you don't know who they know, and ultimately you don't know who they are. So, keep that on point, sort of thing. I don't want to go off topic too much. I can go on about a completely different thing there. I've just had it in my head. That's a great topic for another episode, actually, about that. But keep it on topic with this. We've gone through all those milestone points to get to the end goal. The end goal is you ask for the business at the end, and obviously that was short and sweet. There's more to do in a close, but I'm just conscious of time, and we can go into closing without closing or without selling on another episode. But what did all those things do for my client that I was working with? And remember, this has been in the last 8 weeks. So this isn't some old has-been knowledge that's been floating around the internet or in books for donkey's years. This is relevant right now, and we're recording this particular episode on the 14th of May, 2021. So this is relevant. So over the last 8 weeks, I've applied everything that I have been sharing with everybody over these last 12 episodes, 13 with this one. And if you've worked out the date, you'll realize that we're on episode 13 on a Friday. Depends if you're superstitious or not. But anyway, I've applied everything. And I've also applied a lot of the information and homework that John set you over these last episodes as well, in order to get the results I'm about to share with you. So if you've understood everything and you've applied everything we've said in all these free videos we've been doing for you, and this is free content. I mean, literally, I had someone approach me and I showed them a few clips and they were, this could be sold for a fortune. I went, yeah, it could do. But John and I are on about educating people. That's what all these episodes of Behind the Business is about. It's educating people, giving them usable content that they can, it's inside information that they can use in their business. If they are serious, if they are passionate about growing their business to get powerful results, then this is what these episodes are all about. So results, 8 weeks from a brand new cold audience, zero pipeline from start to finish. The results goes this. Quotes that I've received in. So I'm skipping a few of the things. I'm going for the end results here, or almost end results. Live quotes that are definitely going to go somewhere. It's just not quite the right time at the moment. We're waiting for sign off. £32,940 sterling. That's in quotes. Moving on from quotes and progressed it further down the pipeline to negotiation. So now we're just tweaking a few little bits. It might be just adjusting the price a bit. It might be just adjusting the quantity of product that we're providing and things like this. Negotiation stage, total value, £48,301 sterling. Closed business, money already in the bank, £27,184 sterling. Now that might not seem like a lot, but from a zero pipeline, no clients, no contacts, no conversations beforehand, complete cold contacts. That is a pipeline total of just those 3 stages, just those 3, of £108,425. Now, you might be saying, well, I do that a day or a week in my business. Fantastic. Use the same principles and steps and information we've given you to turn that 108,425. Instead of being 8 weeks and you're doing it in a week or in a day, why don't you try and increase that and increase it so it's, I don't know, 1.4 million. Increase it so it's relevant regardless of what size business you have or what the turnover and, more importantly, the profit is of your business. And again, John and I touched on the turnover and profit vanity sanity scenario before. Those aren't bad numbers, really. And to put it in perspective, because I know some people might be questioning, yeah, but £108,425, that's brilliant. You've done 27,184 as banked money. You've got just over 48,000 that's just waiting to drop in, and nearly 33,000 that's just getting, to the point where it's in a few weeks before they can give the order scenario. So that total amount actually gave my clients, so far, with what I've shown them and taught them on how to do these things and what they weren't doing right before, has now got them over 14% return on investment in 8 weeks. But here's the powerful thing. What I've shown them how to do, remember we did the done for you scenario, or know how to do it, so if somebody goes, you can still, continue to trade and one thing or another, we said in a previous episode. They have that knowledge forever. So actually that 14%, it's actually 14.2% ROI, if you're going to be very specific, is that knowledge is with them forever. And so that number will continue to grow because I don't bill them anymore because they've got the knowledge. Now, if they turn around to me in a few months' time or a year's time and saying, look, Steve, we did really well, we've grown massively, and now we've plateaued again, can we enlist your services? Then it might be a case we do a mastermind, which is a very very focused, very in-depth and quite heavy going support and coaching side of things that I do. And that's a lot more one-on-one rather than the online course I do at Client Direction, which is more for a lot of people. But even in that course, I still have the weekly live Q&A. because I want to make sure people are taking those steps in the course, actioning them, understanding the action, get them to tell me exactly that they understand it. So on a Friday, when we have the next follow-up call and they say, yeah, I've done it, or I've nearly done it, and this is what I've just missed out on, we can tweak it and make sure they get those results, those wins, hit those milestones so they can have the rewards that John spoke about in the previous episodes. So £108,425 in brand new pipeline activity in 8 weeks, using what I teach in client direction and also incorporating a lot of the techniques John shared with these episodes. John, have you got anything that you want to ask me about that?
No, I think you've been very clear on the process there. And I think it's fair to say that because you started with a zero pipeline, and that's 8 weeks results, that that pipeline, that amount of money is going to clear through in at the most a further 8 weeks. So that gives you an idea of, for that particular industry, the length of time it takes to go from zero to sale. And then obviously there's follow-up and things like that, which we will talk about in future episodes. I think it's worth noting that for each individual industry, those pipelines will be different lengths, because the processes for buying are different. I know I used to work in the NHS, and the procurement process for that is a long process. So it goes back again to what we were saying earlier on about researching your industry, researching your particular prospects, the companies that you want to work with. But yeah, really good content this week, Steve. Really clear. It really brings together everything that we talked about over the last 12 episodes. And I think people will find it extremely clear. And people who have been going, well, hang on a minute, how does this all fit together? You've just answered that question very well. This has been a slightly longer episode than usual for that reason, and obviously I've interjected with a few questions along the way on behalf of the listeners, and thanks for putting up with that, Steve. Is there any homework that relates to today that you can set for the people listening?
Yeah, the homework for me, as always, and I know you and I work slightly differently with homework, and that's why this works so well, is go back and listen to this episode. If you haven't had a chance to make notes, or you have, but something hasn't quite clicked right, and like John said, it's that ooh moment and that sit back or open your eyes moment that John did earlier, something doesn't quite sit right, maybe because you were making notes and missed the next step. So go back and listen to them and pause it and make your notes, then carry on. Listen to it maybe 2 or 3 times over, because there's a lot of content I've put in there, and a lot of it will relate to previous episodes. So that's why it's better to watch from episode 1 through to this episode rather than watch this episode and try and work it out, because you're going to have so many questions and it's not going to make sense. Where if you've listened to the other episodes in order, and again, John and I said this before, we try to do this so it flows, and it's like revealing the process each week. Now, if you're just finding out about us and behind the business, then you've got a lot of content to be going at, but do take it in order, otherwise you'll get mixed up and it won't get you the results, and then you'll be thinking we're full of it. We're not full of it. I've just proved to you the results I've got over 8 weeks for a client. I've done this repeatedly over 16 years, in fact longer than 16 years now. I've done this repeatedly. I started off with my own business and it worked. I learned a lot of lessons in that business as well. And John knows about my first experience in business, and he knows what the outcomes were and how we had to overcome them. And John helped me a lot with that, because I needed his expertise to deal with certain scenarios and situations that were happening in my head. So you need to go through these episodes in order, take the notes, but more importantly, take action. And you too can have those kind of results. And they're not flash in the pan. They're not, oh, that was lucky. They're actually achieved by applying the right processes, they're having the right mindset and being prepared and staying focused and having the right support and the right experts around you. You can't be an expert at absolutely everything in your business, but understanding every part of your business, now that's a different thing altogether. And that might be something we do a topic on, John, possibly.
Yeah, I think a topic on how you pick your team, how you pick the people you surround yourself with, I think that's going to be quite useful, because nobody does everything alone. I mean, both Steve and I in our own businesses, we are sort of armies of one. But I think we can both sit here and be quite honest and say, well, yeah, but we may be the one person in our business, but there are other people that we surround ourselves with. If I need help on something that Steve's an expert in, I pick up the phone. If Steve needs help with something that I know about, he picks up the phone.
I have picked up the phone,
and he has, and it works both ways. And there are other subjects and there are other people in my sort of loose team, if you like, who are not part of my business, but I know if I need help with that, I pick up the phone. If they need me, they pick up the phone, and it's checks and balances, and it works out.
Yeah, and it is. And I think what John's saying there is, although we don't have all the people working as a team within our businesses, how many companies that are watching this or listening to this can say they have a graphics designer that works in the business? Obviously, if you're in that industry, you're going to have one. But for example, say you're an electrician or a plumber or an accountant, or you sell generators to construction industry. I mentioned that earlier on. You're not going to have your own graphics designer. You're not going to have your own printers to print all your stationery material. You would outsource that. You would have a company that is your point of contact. They're still part of your team. And, I have people that do all these different things for me, and John's the same. So that's what he was kind of saying there. But the homework is go back through this episode, take the notes, then take action. If something doesn't make sense, you need to listen to all the other episodes again, because you've missed something. Because it isn't that we've missed it. We might not have covered it yet in an episode, and that's a different thing altogether. But from where we've got up to today and what I've gone through today, we have covered everything in the previous episodes. There's not one thing really, I don't think, John, correct me if I'm wrong, that I have gone through today that we haven't already covered in more detail in previous episodes.
No, there's nothing. Everything you've talked about today, we've covered in much more depth in a previous episode.
Fantastic. Right. Well, with that said, and John says we have massively overrun. I don't apologize for overrunning, because I think it's been, a really worthwhile topic to go through. And again, it wasn't to impress you. It wasn't to be some fancy guy talking about, look what I can do. It's more a case of impressing upon you that when you get the information and it's given to you, like these episodes are, make good use of them, take action with them, and you will get powerful results just like those. And like John says, those are isolated to that one client. There's other clients I have made way more money in that same period of time. I've also made slightly less. And when I say slightly less, it's probably off the top of my head, I think the lowest I've ever done in 8 weeks is probably about 60,000, I think, as a pipeline. But there was a lot more closed in one business, and there was less still in negotiation and quote stage, so it closed quicker. Again, like John says, every industry is slightly different, but the principles and the processes and the approach to it are all pretty much the same. And that's why we're saying use it. So, hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you haven't got too bored of seeing my face and hearing my voice too much today. But do check out, obviously, on iTunes and Apple Play and your other podcast providers if you want to listen to it again while you're driving down the road in your car, or while you're going for a jog around the park, or whatever it is you do. And until next week, and I know there's some exciting news coming with regards to Behind the Business over these coming weeks that John and I have been talking about, but we'll save that for another day. But stay tuned, click the bell on the YouTube so you get notification of the new videos as John uploads them. And we look forward to sharing a lot more quality content that you can take action with in the next episode of Behind the Business. Take care.